Welcome to the great arena of Hagnar, ladies and gentlemen. Thankfully, you all find yourselves on the right side of the Colosseum's walls, as the worshippers of Cain will be showing off their martial might today. From the zealotous Sisters of Slaughter to the shadow-blessed warlocks, and from the winged Caneri to the gorgeous goddess of murder herself, Morathi-Khaine. You will see all of them tonight, and I am here to tell you all you need to know about them. The bulk of Morathi's forces are made up out of the uncountable number of warrior elves that follow the teachings of Cain. These religious zealots care about little else than pleasing the bloody-handed God of Murder and thus follow Morathi's commands as if they're gospel, especially now that she has ascended to godhood and started to slowly replace Cain's imagery by that of her own. Have the Daughters of Khaine become singularly devoted to her. The most common of these devotees are the witch elves. With their long lives, superhuman agility and laser focus, elves tend to excel at anything they put their minds to, and in the case of witch elves, this one focus is the art of bloodshed. Every day of their long lives, witch elves spend their hours training elaborate blade dances, practicing in ritual combat, fighting against gladiators and monsters in the arena, or carving up the enemies of the faith. Like devoted nuns, they spend 90% of their lives in prayer to their god. The one little difference being that the best prayer to Cain is one sung during an arterial spray that would make Dexter blush. It may thus come as no surprise to you that blood sacrifices are an everyday occasion in the temples of Cain. To create their bloody art, the witch elves use magical weapons called skianza. These nasty weapons are crafted with a barbed curve that allows for optimal tearing when pulled from their victim's body. After being forged, they are then cooled in the blood of sacrificial victims, while specially chosen hag queens enforce them with their blessings. Equipped with these blood-wrack daggers and perfected through decades of harsh training, the witch elves are then ready to show their worth in actual combat, which is quite the sight to behold. Like any elf, they are calm and composed before the battle, but as the bloodshed starts, the witch elves enter a sort of holy trance. They turn into bloody tornadoes that sing the crimson hymns of Cain as they carve a bloody path through whomever is unfortunate enough to stand in their way. Imagine Taz from the Looney Tunes, but then drinking blood from a beating heart while eyeing you with a disconcerting amount of madness. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper religion without some extremists, and thus let me introduce you to the Sisters of Slaughter. Where the witch elves still participate in ritual dances, prayers and blood sacrifices to appease Cain, the Sisters of Slaughter only see one way to show their devotion to the God of Murder, and that is, you might have guessed, well, murdering people. Witch elves still attach quite some importance to their appearance, and quite a few of them could be accused of vanity. To more completely devote themselves to Cain, these extremists thus undergo the Druharo vow. During this ritual, an enchanted mask of bloodthirsty metal is burned into their flesh, and they are pitted in the arena against other members of the subcult. Those who manage to fight through the pain of literally having their face melted off are then accepted into the sisterhood. Fun fact about the masks, by the way, is that they start to smile and leer whenever bloodshed is nearby. Like a hungry jackal, their masks will start to turn into a rictus grin with a long forked tongue sticking out to taste the blood in the air. Another fun fact is that the masks were originally part of a dark elf ritual known as the Keeled Goth, during which a play was held that demonstrated Cain's fight against the dark forces of chaos. Anyways, the lucky few that managed to survive the initiation ritual are granted a Crip Leash. This is a long whip with a razor-sharp metal rune on the painful end. Since the sisters see combat and killing as the only way to worship Cain, they practice endlessly to become perfect masters of this hard-to-wield weapon. They become so good at this that their fighting style looks like an elaborate dance during which they playfully slash lobs of flesh from their opponent with their whip. The Crip Lash somehow managing to creep just between slits in people's armor, past enemy shields, or through an exposed artery. In some cases, they even play with their prey and take the time to carve entire Cainite runes into their still living opponents. In terms of pure martial prowess, there is no higher position one can achieve within the cult than High Gladiatrix. In some rare occasions, it happens that one warrior in the arena seems to become selected as a chosen of the bloody-handed one. Like a champion of Khorne that suddenly becomes a living tank, or a loony goblin who suddenly feels the Bad Moon's power flowing into his clammy hands. These women become nigh unstoppable and fight off ever more ridiculous foes in the arena. For whatever reason Cain has decided to bless them, they gain the power to dodge hails of arrows, to smash apart spells with their whips, or to cut down a stegodon with a well-placed slash. High gladiatorices are valued greatly, not just for their combat ability, but also for the effects they can have on the morale of the cultists. Other elves recognize that these individuals have been blessed, and their Khainite energies radiate outwards to invigorate those who fight alongside of them. And of course, there's also some Underworld's warbands for the Daughters of Khaine. The most recent of these is the Grysel's Armory. This is basically the murder version of a K-pop band. This squad of Sisters of Slaughter were all the rage back in the arenas of Harkonnen, but they decided it was time for a new challenge. Under the lead of Gryzel the Slaughterer, they set forth on a quest to bring their violent entertainment to the much contested Gnarlwood. Here they pirouette, maim, somersault and slash their way through anything with a pulse, all with the simple goal of murdering everyone in the name of Cain. Often when elves start to ask too many questions, or when their popularity becomes a little bit too great, Morathi wants to see them in her office. This too was the case with the ever-inquisitive and ambitious Hag Queen Morgweth. After she voiced her doubts a bit too loudly, the other tattletales informed Morathi and she was summoned to the High Oracle. Morathi then sent her on a quote-unquote very important quest of great importance that most certainly wasn't just a suicide mission to get rid of her. So Morgweth's Blade Coven was then formed and they set off to the Beastgrave to find a non-existent Shard of Cain. Yet ironically enough, it turned out that the Beastgrave was filled with hidden treasures that Morgweth and her followers managed to put to great use. They are likely still hunting for treasures as we speak, but the suicide mission has left the Blade Coven richer than ever and very much alive. Since Malekith's faction still has to be released, the Daughters of Khaine also have some specialized shadow elves amongst their ranks. Through one way or another, all of these elves have been infused with the shadowy magic of Ugu. The Khainite Shadow Stalkers come in the form of a warcry group as well as an Underworld's warband that I'll cover in a bit, but the main thing that you have to understand about both of these is that Morathi and Malerion have uncovered something called the Umbral Web. This is a magical labyrinth of shadow magic that can provide fast transport to places all over the mortal realms for those who know how to navigate it. Basically, it is like the webway from 40k, but then even more grimdark. The Umbral Web is not just hard to navigate and filled with monsters. Walking through it also melts your soul. Slowly your soul will be replaced by the shadow magic until you are nothing but a shadow of your former self. Literally. Morathi has devised a curse called the Mirath, also known as a shade mark, that binds the victim to this shadowy realm. This gives them a whole bunch of superpowers, such as the ability to teleport via this Umbral Web, ethereal bodies that can survive lethal wounds, the power to summon shadow weapons from the ether, and even basic necromancy. So basically they become the best assassins in the mortal realms, just with the one asterisk that they are slowly consumed by the shadow demons that live in the Umbral Web. Like I mentioned for the Blade Coven, Morathi can be a bit jealous and doesn't tolerate anyone who gainsays her. Because of that, she has devised a plethora of ways that she can use to diplomatically remove someone from the cult, and the Mirath is one of these. The troublemakers believe themselves to be the chosen to join the elite spec ops of shadow warriors, while having no clue that this also means that their lifespan is now extremely limited. As their soul is slowly converted into shadow magic, they become more and more powerful, thus considering these changes a blessing instead of a curse. Meanwhile, Morathi sends them to complete all sorts of secret covert ops missions for her, until they inevitably fade away into the shadows. The Shadeborn are the Underworld's warband version of the Khainite Shadow Stalkers. They were a group stationed in Hagnar, but were cursed and sent into the Nether Maze. Here they were tasked with finding a way in which Morathi could use the magical power of this construct for her own gain. There isn't much more lore for them, so instead let me point out some of the cool weapons that the Shadow Stalkers use. The weird blue mask is a mask of shadowed mirrors. This magical device creates a terrifying visage personalized for whomever looks at it. Like the boggart from Harry Potter, the face of this assassin will always be the most horrifying face that the victim could imagine. The stone weapons are made out of Fallstone, the realm stone of Ugu. This material is plain weird as it tries to hide from anyone who looks at it. It will turn dark to match its surroundings, release shadowy mist, or even partially disappear. This makes it very hard to fight someone wielding Fallstone weapons, as their illusory nature makes them very hard to parry. But then before we go to the warlocks, there is one whole can of worms that we have to crack open first. You might have guessed that the Goddesses of Murder, who gaslit an entire race into believing she was the High Oracle of Cain, maybe isn't the nicest person alive. Well, next to the genocides, warmongering, political murders, con schemes and racism, Morathi is also extremely sexist. To convince the entire Khainite cult as a collective that men are nothing but weak animals, she only forged the most broken and damaged souls into male elves. And for the record, all elven gods were granted a bunch of elven souls from the belly of Slaanesh after they captured the Dark Prince, basically a start your own elven race starter pack. So anyways, since Morathi made all the male elves literally, well, retarded, and since the cult of Cain is a great fan of social Darwinism, the men were soon considered fit for nothing but slavery. They were even renamed to the Leathanam as to not bring shame to the elven race. These Leathanam are considered less than animals and are kept around as free labor, sex slaves, or sacrificial fodder. And while this disgust for men managed to turn a majority of the Daughters of Khaine lesbian, some are still a bit adventurous. Much to the disgust of their pure sisters, some even managed to get pregnant. And this was a problem for Morathi, as these children would be pure-souled elves, and thus some of them could also be male. Morathi is ever resourceful and came up with a perfectly reasonable solution. She cursed the entire Khainite bloodline so that each son would have a broken soul. Instead of gaining an entire soul, Morathi made it so that she could absorb most of it, and she left just enough so that the boy could be turned into a servitor-like menial worker. And this curse is how we ended up with the Doomfire warlocks. See, souls are made up out of magic, and these babies were thus born with a void of the magical variety. In some rare cases, the magic of Ulgu started to fill this void, and instead of a weak Leathanam wretch, the boy would grow up to become a super powerful sorcerer. Another headache for Morathi which she needed to fix. She then invented the Daimkir. This is a magical brand that slaves the warlocks to Morathi and makes it so that they physically cannot refuse her orders. As a nice bonus, it also saps the power of the warlocks and condemns them to a life of everlasting agony. Basically, their soul stuff is constantly burned from their bodies by the mark, while also being refilled by the realm. Of course, to the mothers, Morathi said that this is a potent blessing. The Daimkir is a holy sigil that wards against Slaanesh and empowers the sons to become powerful magic users. The cult utilizes these enslaved warlocks as skirmishers and outriders. They are sent to the flank of the enemy forces and use their powerful magics to hurl soul-burning doomfire at the enemy. And then when softened up, they can lead the charge and cut down the foe with scimitars. But well, with that Graham McNeil level lore out of the way, let's go to the actual Khainite stuff of the cult next. A rather basic but also essential part of the cult are the Hag Queens, who fulfill the role of priestesses in the cult of Cain. Particularly zealous or favored witch elves or sisters of slaughter might be picked by Morathi to become a Hag Queen. These handpicked individuals will go through a long trajectory of rituals and challenges meant to test and empower them. All of this culminates into a final ritual during which they are thrown into a magical cauldron of blood and shadow. This vile swimming pool is filled with eldritch creatures, and only those with enough faith, skill and cunning will make it out alive. Those that do are reborn as a Hag Queen and will find they are capable of channeling Cain's power. Morathi then teaches them a wide variety of rituals, spells and recipes to turn them into proper spiritual leaders. They are then sent back to their respective temple, where they will lead rituals, educate initiates, and channel the power of Cain in battle. Furthermore, they are tasked with the creation of Witch Brew, which is the most important potion of the Daughters of Khaine. This special shimmer juice has to be distilled from the blood of slaughter queens that died in battle. When properly mixed with spices and magic, the resulting brew induces a maddened state in which the consumer becomes nigh invincible. Their eyes turn back into their skull, they shout like maniacs, their blood rapidly clots, they become immune to pain, and they enter an ecstasy-like state in which they are completely consumed by their bloodlust. The other important task that they have is to prepare the rejuvenation treatments. These rites of blood magic require vast quantities of blood, preferably from strong magical creatures, and it can restore the vitality and youthfulness of the target. On one hand, this is a tool of power, as within the vanity-filled cult, denying an elf her beauty treatment hurts her more than any beating could. On the other hand, some cult members are so old that without these treatments they would literally crumble to dust. So yeah, this might look like an elf with a goblet, but in the lore, they are some of the most important members of the cult. Slaughter Queens are the primary ingredient of witch brew. They can be purchased at most elven traffickers, but you can also grow them at home provided you have the patience. Jokes aside, the lackluster lore for the Slaughter Queens mostly has to do with the fact that Games Workshop needed to come up with lore to explain why the old Hellebron model is still in the game, and it kinda shows. Just like with the High Gladiatorices, these not Hellebrons are also handpicked by Morathi for their exceptional martial skill. All of them wield two special swords that both have a name. One is the Blade of Cain, and for the Warhammer Fantasy players, no, it's not that one. There are multiple of this Blade of Cain, and it is a sword with an attack speed enhancement. The other one is called the Death Sword, and it can cut through any armor. Finally, they can also channel Cain's might, like the High Gladiatrix, to break spells or to smite enemies. So back to my original point, they are basically upgraded witch elves whose primary function is to be turned into cocaine. Another unit kinda lacking in the lore department is the Avatar of Khaine. This is simply put a magical golem which can be awakened by blood sacrifice. That is not to discredit their power though, these are massive metal statues that always choose violence when they wake. Animated by the blood magics of Hack Queens, they chop apart the enemies with a sword longer than a horse, and if anything tries to run away, they vomit up a torrent of boiling cane juice that boils the target alive. One fun fact I do have for you is that Morathi is slowly replacing the Avatars of Khaine by female statues to further establish her position as the new Goddess of Murder. As a result, many of the avatars in Hak Nar are now winged females instead of the traditionally angry dudes. Sadly, no models for these new versions though. What all of the aforementioned have in common is that all of them are part of the Cauldron of Blood kit. In fact, every unit in this category, except the last one, is part from that same kit. When you build your own Cauldron of Blood, you can choose to add a Hack Queen or a Slaughter Queen, and you can even have an Avatar of Khaine on top. Regardless, back to the lore. Cauldrons of Blood are believed to be magical constructs granted to the devoted by Cain himself. These war machines will drive of their own accord and can be controlled by the blood magic of the Hack Queens. All of them contain a magical cauldron that the Hack Queens can use for their magic rituals. Most importantly, they fill it with the blood of those slain during battle. This blood is then converted to a magical red mist that fills the nearby elves with extra power, making them faster, sharper, and more resilient to damage. And well, when your entire force consists out of women who refuse to wear armor, a potent defensive buff spell is never out of the place. However, like most things in Morathi's fake religion, that is only half of what the Cauldrons of Blood do. See, these magical cauldrons have the special ability that they never fill. No matter how much blood you put in, they never overflow and the liquid level never changes. The reason for this is that the Cauldrons of Blood are in fact magical artifacts handcrafted by Morathi and her inner circle. And while they do indeed provide some magical buffs, the majority of the blood that is poured into them is teleported into the Methquar, Morathi's own magical cauldron. Since all temples religiously capture and sacrifice creatures into these cauldrons, Morathi gets another constant stream of magical essence which she uses to empower herself even further. To the greater cult, being turned into a blood-wrack Medusa is seen as a great honor. It is to receive a portion of Cain's own power with which you transcend to a higher state of being, similar to ascending to a demon prince for the followers of chaos. But just like ascending, all isn't what it seems. During the ritual known as the Slith Anar, one is bitten by the snakes that adorn the scalp of the Shadow Queen. Their poison doesn't just cause infernal suffering, but also sets in motion a transformation that will turn an elf into a demon of Cain. Regardless of who they were beforehand, after the transformation they mindlessly follow the commands of the Shadow Queen. So while it is indeed sometimes a reward for the most devout followers, it is often used as a tool to turn critical leaders into mindless pawns. That being said, it does indeed come with a massive boost in power. Medusae can exsanguinate people just by looking at them. They can rapidly turn people into marmalade with their spear or claw, and they obtain a special affinity for canine magic. Interestingly enough, after Morathi and the Shadow Queen became two separate entities, the Shadow Queen has started to behave more and more erratic. Especially concerning is that she regularly sneaks out, and then returns to Helahard with a dozen new Medusa. Creatures that are mind-shackled to the Shadow Queen alone, so not necessarily to Morathi. No one knows what she is up to, but an avatar of murder and rage building a secret army is never a good sign. To maximize the combat potential of a blood-wrack Medusa, they are sometimes placed onto a blood-wrack shrine. This construct is similar to the Cauldron of Blood, but then features a magical mirror instead of a cauldron. This so-called Sketmare acts like a speaker system, but then for the Medusa's cursed gaze. By staring into this cursed mirror, the Medusa can radiate out vibes so dark and sadistic that people simply start dying around her. The aura that spreads from the shrine is so agonizing that people start seizing until they die. So yeah, if you ever feel bad about yourself, imagine that there's a creature out there so ugly that people would rather die than look at a reflection. Then it is time for the most based, the most blue-pilled, the chattest rebel elf to ever Cain. Kusza, now known as the Crone seer, wasn't always an eldritch witch prophet that makes the Shadow Queen uncomfortable. In fact, she started off as a bit of a massive nerd. A brave one, but a nerd nonetheless. As a member of the Cult of Cain, Kusza decided that all the fighting wasn't really for her and instead preferred to haunt the halls of the library. If that alone wasn't enough to piss off half of her peers, she also thought that Cain was kinda cringe and instead spent all her time researching Morathi-Khaine. For the new facts, Morathi-Khaine is the elven goddess of prophecy and death, similar to the three fates from Hercules. Now, like most other elven gods, she was eaten by Slaanesh during the end of times, and at the start of the story, she simply doesn't exist. Kusza thus spends her early life beaten and scorned while worshipping a goddess that didn't exist. Regardless, she frequently receives visions and nightmares that told her about an ancient temple of her senpai that remained hidden in the darkest depths of Ulgaroth. She eventually traveled there and found a magical artifact known as the Circlet of Morathi-Khaine. Like Illidan from World of Warcraft, she was promised all sorts of stuff if she just sacrificed her eyes and put on the circlet. Kusza was kinda down bad and actually placed the circlet on her head. This carved out both of her eyes and left her crying alone in agony on the temple floor. And now, since Morathi-Khaine was still stuck in the belly of Slaanesh, this did nothing for her but blind her. Regardless, her fate was rewarded years later, as Mirath cut open Slaanesh's belly when she wanted to absorb all the souls for her ascension to godhood. This allowed a bunch of barely dead gods to escape, and amongst them was Morathi-Khaine. On that day, Kusza went from a blind simp for a long dead god to a literal avatar of Morathi-Khaine, so I think it suffices to say that her prayers were finally answered. She sprouted massive angelic wings, obtained a talent for shadow magic, received an army of magical crows through which she can see, and most importantly, got a direct Discord call with Morathi-Khaine. By burning sacrifices to her god, she can now receive visions of the future. Yet, like those received by the Night Lords from 40k, they aren't very reliable. What bothers her especially is that she has witnessed both a great future for the elven race, as well as its utter destruction. She doesn't know what causes which future to happen, but has made it her quest to prevent the latter from happening. Okay, but how is all of this relevant? Well, many of Marathi's servants feel downtrodden and mistreated, the Doomfire warlocks and shadow stalkers especially. These have started to flock to Kusza, which has resulted in a bit of a cult following. Moreover, Kusza knows that Morathi is just a scam artist, and thus those critical of Morathi have also started to join. Basically, Kusza has accidentally started a rival cult within the Daughters of Khaine, which has put her at odds with Morathi. How that feud will end though, that is ironically enough something only time will tell. From the pagan Crone seer, let's move to the other side of the loyalty spectrum. These monstrous elves have been handcrafted by Morathi from the souls she reclaimed from Slaanesh. Reforged with shadow magic and restored with Morathi's own lifeblood, these creatures are literally designed to be loyal to Morathi and Morathi alone. The most iconic of these have to be the Blood Sisters, so let me show you their features. Their magical cracked masks might immediately draw your attention, as that is what they were made for. These masks symbolize the fury of Cain and help to make these warriors seem even more intimidating to their opponents. However, their more useful feature is that they can change the appearance of the wearer. When required, the Blood Sisters can shed their gruesome appearance and change into a normal elf. This allows them to easily infiltrate crowds or gatherings, which can be very useful when gathering information. Because while being granted a contingent of Blood Sisters is considered a great honor for a Cainite coven, this rarely is an act of pure kindness. Sure, the Malusi form potent allies in combat, but their main purpose is to act as sleeper agents for Morathi, informing her of potential dissidents, making sure blasphemous or powerful relics are transported back to Hagnar, and even secretly executing those who become a bit too ambitious. One very cool ability these snakes have is called the Sket Touch. This curse causes the victim to be turned into a sentient statue of blood-red crystal. They can still feel, see and think, but for all eternity they will be stuck as a mute, immovable statue. Morathi and her Malusi enjoy this form of punishment quite a lot, and have even gathered an entire statue garden filled with hated foes. It was also used to great effect during the invasion of the Eight Peaks. Here Morathi betrayed Stormcast troops that accompanied her, but to prevent them from turning into lightning and being teleported back to Azir, she had her blood sisters stab them. Since they didn't die, they didn't get reforged, and thus Morathi's betrayal could remain hidden for a while longer. The final sadistic fact about these snacks is that they love nothing more than mortally hurting a foe before subjecting them to this cat touch. They go to great lengths to carve out the still beating heart of a foe with their spears in one cut. Then, as they turn to crystal, they will forever feel the pain of being stabbed through the heart with a Khainite spear. The ranged version of these are the blood stalkers. In terms of politics, they function very much the same, but in combat they prefer to bring dead from the shadows, picking stealth over intimidation. Instead of a crystallizing spear, they use Heartseeker bows made from ash dusk wood. These blessed weapons fire arrows that act like targeting missiles, and as long as they are fired in the general direction of an enemy, they'll seek out its heart. So basically it's like Carillion's ult, but a bit more edgy. Bloodstalkers, as the name might suggest, furthermore like to utilize stealth, and as such tend to stay quiet during combat. Instead of shouting war cries like their more enthusiastic sisters, they use complex sign language to convey strategic information to their squad mates. Not that they are immune to the Khainite bloodlust though, all of them carry long daggers with them known as Skianlar. These are sharp sacrificial daggers that function decent enough in close combat, but their primary purpose is to carve out the hearts of their fallen prey and sacrifice them in mini rituals. And yes, again, this ritual empowers Morathi by transmitting the fallen foe's essence to her like a PayPal donation. You might also have noticed that one of them has a pet dragon. This is a bloodworm, a special creature that can track the smell of blood from miles away, and as an added bonus, their saliva is a potent anticoagulant. So after being bitten by one, you're likely to suffer from an acute form of hemophilia. The elite of the Malusi are the Iron Scales. These special snakes are made from the souls that brimmed with so much hatred against Slaanesh that they managed to stay more or less intact. Where most souls were broken by millennia of torture, these wanted revenge so bad that their pure spite has kept them together. Morathi recognized the potential and spent ample time to make them into her own version of Primarchs. For starters, they come with a series of upgrades over their normie sisters. They can cast Eldritch Blasts of shadow magic, they can crush hearts to summon a buffing aura around them, they are highly resistant to all forms of magic, except that of Morathi of course. They get a magical staff known as a Keldra Scythe, which features magical snakes that tear the heart out of anyone they are pointed at. But maybe most importantly, they are part of Morathi's inner circle. Only they really know what plans their Grand Leader puts in motion, and it is their task to make sure that they are executed properly without the wider cult becoming aware of the multitude of lies that Morathi has used to build her kingdom. As such, most crusades that are sent to retrieve ancient magical relics are led by Iron Scales. Morathi's personal bodyguard, the Viperic Guard, is led by one, and if your coven is leaning a bit too far from the flock, it is likely that one will come by to convey the word of your goddess. The other known breed of the Scatborn are the Caneri. These are a breed of bat-winged elves that can best be likened to the harpies of the Greek legends. Just like the Malusi, these are a creation of Morathi made from the soul siphoned from the imprisoned Dark Prince. Unlike the Malusi though, these souls were not just damaged but also touched by chaos. As a result, the outcome is a bit less sane and a bit more impish looking. Regardless, their speed, agility and ability to fly makes them a potent tool in war, and thus Morathi sends out flocks each solstice to empower covens in need. The most well composed of these are the Life Takers. These winged devils soar over the battlefield like birds of prey. They are opportunistic hunters that can spot any crack in the enemy's defense, and when spotted they fall down from the skies with lightning speed and carve a bloody path in the enemy's exposed flank. Then, when the fighting becomes too heavy, they lift off again and look for the next opportunity. It should also be said that while they might look rather light and lanky, the Caneri possess a surprising amount of strength. This, combined with the magical nature of their weapons, allows them to carve open horses, cut off heads, or mangle monsters in a single stroke. Okay, but those were the tame variant. The Heartrenders have been affected a bit more by their time aboard the Slaaneshi party boat. For starters, these creatures are rumored to be hideously deformed. Not that anyone knows for sure, as they never take off their veils or masks, but I like to imagine Malina from Mortal Kombat. Second is the fact that they are very prone to toying with retreating forces instead of sticking to the actual fight. Heartrenders love nothing more than to chase after running enemies, kill a few in brutal fashion, and then to disappear in the clouds again. Then just when the enemies think they are safe, the Heartrenders fall from the sky with a terrifying shriek to carve up the remaining prey. Heartrenders fight using a magical javelin that they can resummon after using it. When they spot a nice target, they fold their wings to become as aerodynamic as possible, and then just when they are about to crash into the ground, they release the javelin and pull up again. The javelin then crashes down with such speed that it has been known to pin an armored rider and his mount to the ground like an insect in a museum. Of course, remaining out of range is no fun, and while some run away to play with broken regiments, others instead dive into the melee to prove themselves, forgoing their aerial superiority to show off their martial prowess against whomever caught their eye. Like I said, useful but unreliable and alarmingly Slaanesh-like. Of course, an entire faction of witches also needs to have some endless spells, so let's take a look. The first endless spell of the Daughters of Khaine is the Blade Wind. This very much does what it says on the tin and is a tornado-like dervish of enchanted falchions. These fly through the air and slash anything in their way, whether that be rock, armor, or people. The resulting gore only helps to carry the knives further. Next is the Bloodwrack Viper. This is a magical snake summoned from a pool of boiling blood. On the battlefield, it will go hunting for prey to capture and kill. And upon capturing something with its massive jaw, it will wrap itself around the prey and squish until they explode in a fountain of gore. Finally, there's the Heart of Fury, which is the hardest to summon yet also arguably the most powerful. This magical representation of Cain's rage can only be summoned by the most devout of the cult, but provides a magical aura that allows elves to shrug off grievous wounds and keep on fighting. And that only leaves one more model to be covered, or well, two technically speaking. The former shape-shifting High Oracle of Cain, the current Goddess of Murder, Morathi-Khaine, and her scary companion, the Shadow Queen. Morathi was already a character of great importance in the world that was, and to say that she wasn't very nice would be the understatement of the millennium. Because of this, the other gods basically cancelled her during the Age of Myth and exiled her to the darkest corner of Ulgu. Yet she wasn't about to accept this fall from grace and started the most complex and daring plot the realms had ever seen. Step 1 was acquiring the Iron Heart of Cain. This was the last remnant of the dead elven god Cain, the god of murder and the patron god of the Dark Elves to which she had belonged in the world that was. This artifact would allow her to absorb the energy of Cain. Basically, if Cain would obtain more power via prayer or sacrifice, she could drain this from the heart and use it for her own gains. She then joined the other elven gods in their plan to trap Slaanesh and was rewarded with a bunch of elven souls in the process. Morathi remade these souls like I described previously and introduced these newborn elves into the cult of Cain. She declared herself the High Oracle of this cult and told the cultists that by following her lead they could resurrect their fallen god. Yet this was all a lie, of course. The only thing preventing Cain's return was Morathi, who was constantly sapping all the power from his iron heart. The artifacts collected by the cultists, the souls of the male elves, the blood offers, the sacrificed hearts, all of it was absorbed by Morathi to make herself all-powerful. Over the millennia, the cult became more and more powerful, which culminated during the events of Broken Realms. Here, Morathi enacted a massive ritual during which she managed to eat a massive amount of elven souls directly from the belly of Slaanesh. This, combined with a boatload of Varanite and the magical lantern of the Idanet, made her so powerful that she ascended to godhood, turning her into Morathi-Khaine, the self-proclaimed second coming of the bloody-handed god. It came with one big downside though, as the soul of Einarion carved her psyche in twain and split her soul over two physical bodies. One is the beautiful, cunning aristocrat we all know from Warhammer Fantasy, capable, cold, ruthless, and pragmatic to the extreme. The other one, however, known as the Shadow Queen, is basically an avatar of all the petty anger and resentment that has built up over her long life. This is a monstrous creature that lashes out in fury with little thought of the consequences. Especially now, during the era of the Beast, Morathi is having a very hard time keeping it in check. So in the end, her plot did allow her to become a god, but she has pissed off almost half the other gods in the realms with various acts of betrayal. Her psyche has birthed a monstrous creature which might be plotting against her other half. She leads a cult built on lies that could crumble at any moment, and then I'm not even talking about how the Ascension ritual damaged her magical cauldron, released multiple dead elven gods, allowed Slaanesh to birth 2 avatars, and caused the rise of Kusza. But hey, if anyone can manage to sail through that storm, then it's Morathi. And that rounds up the lore of the Daughters of Khaine models, a bunch of murderous elves with a penchant for blood magic and turning hearts into a magical currency. Definitely the faction for anyone with a love for Greek mythology, disgruntled dark elf players, and those with very questionable political beliefs. Jokes aside, Morathi's House of Cards has become quite a fun faction over the years, and I'd be down to watch a drama show about all of her scheming and plotting. My personal favorite model has to be Kusza, not just because of how her lore impacts the one-woman show of Morathi, but also because of how plain awesome she looks. I mean, a fallen angel with shadow powers and an army of ravens? Sign me up. But please also let me know your favorite in the comments down below, and stay tuned for the next episode.